off UFO.
Welcome to Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis. Now here's your host, Andrew.
And welcome to Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis, here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, also broadcast live on UPRN 105.5 New Orleans. I'm your host, Andrew, and tonight my guest will be Pete Harvenger. On a bit of a sad note, I'd like to have all my listeners keep the people of Chile and Argentina in their thoughts and prayers. Chile was hit with an 8.8 earthquake very, very early this morning, and Argentina was hit with a 6.3 today. The tsunami warnings that were out for Hawaii have been canceled. Fortunately for them, the waves that did come in didn't get any higher than about 3 or 4 feet. Also, I would like for everyone to keep Walter Koenig. He was the gentleman who played Ensign Chekhov on Star Trek, the original Star Trek. He lost his son here a day or two ago, and he's in our thoughts and prayers as well. And on a happier note, I would like to wish happy birthday to Bill Burt. His birthday is tomorrow, so happy birthday, Bill. Still not letting us know how old you are, but we'll find out. And also you can listen to the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on your cell phone simply by calling 704-631-4060 and entering the 4-digit station ID code 2899. And Pete Harvenger has had a personal UFO sighting in 1958, and today is the 52nd anniversary of that sighting. Pete was a member of NICAP for 20 years and has been a member of QFOS since the 1980s. In early 1989, Pete and a few others started having monthly meetings with UFO researchers and enthusiasts in the area, and this group eventually became RUFOS, or the Round Town UFO Society. The RUFOS website has some great info on it, and I recommend everyone to check it out. This is Pete's second guest appearance on Eye to the Sky, and I am pleased and honored to welcome him back on the program this evening. And welcome back, Pete.
Well, thank you, Dee. I'm glad to be back.
And as we stated, today is the 52nd anniversary of your first sighting.
Now, that's true. It's a date that you never forget. You know, there are certain dates you always remember, of course, your birthday, other birthdays and that of your family and that, but this is a day I always remember, February 27th of 1958. It's when I became, there was no more doubts in my mind about UFOs, that I became convinced that, yes, they did exist.
Gosh, I wasn't even born yet.
I understand.
But yeah, I can relate on to what you're saying when you have your first sighting. It is very dramatic, or not dramatic, traumatic, impressive, life-altering sometimes.
Oh, definitely. You know, the way you think about life, you know, I always tell people there's more to life than we've ever been told.
True.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell us about your sighting.
Well, what it was in the early morning hours of February 27th. My brother had came to bed. He watched the late movie. At that time, I knew the late movie went off about 1 o'clock in the morning. And prior to this, leading up to this sighting, in November of 1957, Levelland, Texas, had a famous sighting. Me and my brother heard it on radio at that time, where like up to a dozen automobiles was going down the highway around 10 o'clock at night outside Levelland, Texas, seeing this huge bright lit object go over their cars. All the car engines failed on them. Later years, we found out the local sheriff was also involved in this sighting. So we heard some of the witnesses' statements and that really got us thinking about the subject. So in early February of 58, I was going out to a local basketball tournament with my friend. It was at nighttime. I've seen a red object in the sky hovering. Well, as we was going to the Fairgrounds Coliseum here in Circleville, this red object made a low pass over the fairgrounds. And at that time, I was thinking, could this be a helicopter or whatever could it be? It's very unusual at that time. I came home and told my brother about it and that. So now, coming up to February 27th, when he got done watching the late movie, he came upstairs and he looked out the window to see if he could see anything. And Lord and behold, he saw the object he described to me as a regular saucer-shaped craft with windows on it and that. And the next thing I knew, I was laying in bed asleep, and he was pulling on me, dragging me out of bed. And I was telling him, hey, I got to go to school the next day. I was a junior in high school at the time. He said, no. He said, you got to see this flying saucer. So the way he acted, I thought, well, something is strange. So I went over to his bedroom. We looked out the window toward the west. And when I saw it, it was farther away. But it was a very bright object in the sky. It lit. I could tell it was a partially clouded night because it lit the clouds up around it. Well, it kept going out toward the west, and in my own mind again, I was trying to think, well, what could this be as a natural explanation? And, of course, he was all excited in that, and the object eventually disappeared out of sight. And for about 30 seconds, he was telling me what he had seen in that, and we were still looking out toward that direction, and all of a sudden, a red orange ball of light came back toward us from where that object had disappeared. So it was a totally different type of object at that time. It's coming back, and we got within about maybe a half mile from us. It was over Circleville, and I was about ready to crawl underneath the bed. But then it stopped and hovered in midair. And if you can imagine like the setting sun, a red-orange color to it, well, the top half folded down into itself. I still remember it went in sections from right to left, sections where all of a sudden it was just a half-moon-shaped object. Well, that half-moon-shaped object then tilted downward toward the left, and then slowly went down behind the buildings and trees. And that just blew our mind, I mean, what could anything like that perform like that? It was just amazing. And I knew then that UFOs did exist. We laid there in bed for a couple hours and that to see if anything developed. And I remember a police car going by the warehouse down there on Clinton Street, shine light in the warehouse, just checking on things, and just imagine just a half hour or so before that object had went overhead. And my brother was all anxious, maybe run down the street. I said, no, he said, just let it go. I said, we'll wait for other people to report seeing it. But as it happens in a lot of cases, nobody else reported it, so we just kept to ourselves until a couple weeks later we told our family members and that, and like I say, the following year then, I was a senior in high school then. Our public speaking teacher told us to let's make a project and give a talk on a controversial subject, and he said, like, why you don't believe in flying saucers. And that brought me out of my shell, you might say. And I said, well, what if you do believe in them? And then he said, well, go ahead and do this project. And because of that, I was able to look up a local farmer that had a sighting back in 1948. He became kind of known about around the country because Donald Kehoe wrote about him, and others. He came within 100 feet of an object. Interviewed him, and then I joined NICAP, the organization out of Washington, D.C., and so I've been involved in research ever since.
Wow. And you spent, 20 years?
With NICAP. So
NICAP.
Yeah, it was, because I could have joined APRO also. It was an organization based out of New Mexico, I believe it was, out west there. But I wanted to join NICAP because, being in Washington, D.C., they had some outstanding individuals. One of the board of directors was Admiral Hillenkotter, who was our first CIA director. He became a board member on this UFO outfit. So it was an impressive deal. And Donald Kehoe, later years I did meet him personally in that, and went over my sighting report with him, and he thought that was very interesting. And in later years also, the J. Allen Hynek, and after his talk over at Dayton Wright-Patterson Museum, I got to talk to him about my sighting. He also thought it was very impressive.
That's got me jealous that you've got to meet both those gentlemen. They are way up there in my list of the great researchers.
In fact, Donald Kehoe, he gave a presentation at the Veterans Memorial there in Columbus. I went backstage and talked to him beforehand, and talked to him about my sighting and that. So they're impressed by it, and it stays with you. You never forget it. But I also don't become obsessed by it. I'm involved in other things here in the local community. I'm with the county park board, trying to open up an old railroad track to a recreational trail. I've helped founded the High School Alumni Association, and I'm also on the Soldiers Monumental Association. I'm the property officer of the local military museum. Being a retired air guardman I served 2 years in the Army and then 20 years in the High Air Guard, which I'm very proud of.
You're a busy man.
Yeah, well, I always say, though, the family comes first. You know, and that's what I like today. I went down to see my grandson play a basketball game and that, and it was important to do that.
Did he win?
No, they won last night game, but they got beat today. They played a pretty good team today. But he had fun playing. You know, you always tell him to try your best and have fun while you're doing it.
Well, as long as he has good sportsmanship, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was looking on your website, and gosh, some of the sightings that have been coming in to you guys.
Yeah, very interesting. What I'm talking about the website, like you say, it's a good one. We really do feel it's a good one. I got about 20 news articles written in there. One was the latest one is about Lonnie Zamora's sighting. Before that was Do We Share This Planet? And there's other side reports. John Fryer, chief researcher, has over 200 book reviews. We also have several good links, one with your organization, Eyes of the Sky. I also have updates. Started last year on it. After every monthly meeting, I always take the highlights from that and then get with my webmaster, and he puts it in our website. So the people knows what's the latest about UFOs. They can go to our website and do that. Would you want me to go over February's, a little bit of it, or?
Sure.
Okay, in February, we've got some highlights here. Janice Sharp, she's the mother of a British computer hacker, Gary McKinnon. They talked on the Coast to Coast radio show. Gary McKinnon, a couple of years ago, that he was arrested for hacking into government files and that. He lives over in Britain. But the government files, he admitted hacking into a range of private networks, including NASA and the U.S. military, while looking for data on UFO cover-ups. He'd been hacking in the system for about 6 months to a year, but he was leaving notes pointing out the numerous security problems they had. And he was really trying to help them out, but it became known that, the government does have UFO files and that in there. So just his mother's trying to leading a campaign to prevent her son from being extradited to the U.S. to face trial and imprisonment. So it's going to be interesting what happens out of that. But like I say, he was wrong for hacking into the system. At the same time, it's being noted that it contained a lot of UFO files in that. Go ahead.
If he does go to trial here, it would be interesting, to keep an eye on what goes on. What kind of...
If the newspapers would pick up on it, it'd be very interesting, publicity-wise, or the television networks, and how it's going to come about. Or are they going to let him go ahead and talk about what files he got into? I mean, what it pertain to UFO information? So we just have to sit back and watch what may develop out of that. Another item I have is this: Malcolm Robinson has written a book titled UFO Case Files of Scotland. See, all countries around the world have had these sightings, no doubt. But Malcolm has lectured extensively on UFOs and the paranormal all over the UK and Ireland. He's a researcher with over 40 years' expertise. So he's written a book about, the sightings in Scotland. Excuse me. Another item is 100 pages of secret files on New Zealand UFO sightings are supposed to be released by the military this year. Files include reports of UFO sightings from 1979, 1984, when there was high activity around New Zealand. Another one's X conferences to be held on May 7th through May 9th at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Speakers will include George Knapp and Richard Dolan, a couple of top researchers also. Now, nations that so far have announced releasing UFO files include New Zealand, France, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, Denmark, Sweden, Uruguay, Brazil, Mexico, Russia, and Chile. So a lot of them have released UFOs. Now, some of these UFO files may be some of the standard reports. I think just a belief in me is that some of the top reports are never released, maybe. Maybe made by the military or whatever. That's just my opinion. But a lot of these countries are releasing, what files they say they do have on them. Now, every month, also belong to the Mutual UFO Network. That's the largest UFO reporting organization in the world, supposedly. And every month they give out their sighting reports they've had. Well, do you want to go over that? I'll give over the list real quick.
Sure.
Okay, for January 2010, there was a total of 440 reports of MUFON. USA had 359. California led in states with 41. And I always put Ohio, we had 10. Well, what's interesting then is out of these 440 reports, they had, within 100 feet, they had 45 sightings within 100 feet. They had 33 landings, hovering, or takeoffs reported. And very interesting is 12 entities observed. Now, every month, the MUFON puts out, and you can go on our updates on our website, and you see this report. And they always have so many entities are being observed around the UFO or in the UFO, whatever. I think that's very significant, what's being reported. Now, of course, some of these reports are hoaxes, and you have to take each one and check out very carefully. But there's been so many that there's bound to be some very authentic cases. Now, we have a MUFON of Ohio meeting also belong to. The meeting is scheduled for May 15th. It's at the Ashland County, Ohio Sheriff's Complex. We got Ted Phillips and Stan Gordon coming in. Ted Phillips is the leading landing trace researcher in the country. Has around 4,000 to 5,000 cases where UFOs have been seen, where it took off or landed and left a landing trace case. And Stan Gordon's a very good researcher from Pennsylvania. He's done a lot on the Kecksburg case. And this last item I'll go over is it's very interesting. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, has designated the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies as one of the reporting centers for UFO sightings and unexplained phenomena. In its December 10th, 2009 update, Air Traffic Control Organization, the FAA, said pilots and air traffic controllers should refer the said reports, which is UFO reports, to the Las Vegas-based company that explores extremely advanced aerospace technology. In other words, this acknowledges that the FAA does know of UFO reports still being reported to them. So, they're admitting this. They're still getting reports.
Wow. Speaking of Ted Phillips, for some reason his website has just disappeared.
Oh, it has? I haven't checked on that lately. I'll have to check on May 15th. Like I said, we're supposed to meet up with him, so I'll have to find out what's going on. Of course, a lot of times it's your webmaster. We have a good one around town, UFO Societies. Michael Moore out of Asheville. He does a real good job for us. So why Ted's would have, like I say, I'll have to check with him in May when I get to talk to him.
I noticed it here just recently when I was trying to get a link to that website sent to somebody else, and it wasn't there.
Did you go to our website and check it out?
Yes, I did.
It wasn't there then, huh?
Your website's working fine.
Yeah, but I mean, then we have a link to his.
Oh, no, I didn't. No, I just went right straight to his website.
Maybe if you go to ours and then try to link on from ours and see what happens. But, yeah, that's a question. Excuse me, I'll have to check that too and then check with him. Yeah, because he does very good research, on that. When you talk about evidence, well, that's one of the top evidences we have, is landing trace cases. And when people say, well, you just thought you saw something, I say, wait a minute now, it left marks on the ground or whatever, so that's a pretty good indication that something heavy was there,
Well, that's like with the Rendlesham Forest incident.
Mm-hmm.
They tried saying, we just saw the light from the Orford Nest Lighthouse.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's kind of laughable. Some of these skeptics get on TV and that, and some of the shows, Larry King's show and some others, always have to have a skeptic on there, which is okay. But if they keep their facts straight, it would be all right. But they just make up things galore, It's unreal. The Air Force officers even said, no, that was definitely not the lighthouse. And yet a skeptic would try to keep to that, you know. It's just like in my sighting I had, I'll never forget, I was talking to a fellow worker and down worked for DuPont, and he said, Pete, he said, what you saw was probably one of our advanced craft. And this was back in, I said, well, back in 1958 I saw it. I said, as a veteran in the military, I'd be very upset if that was one of our craft, if we didn't use that technology in Vietnam or something like that, you know.
Oh, exactly. Exactly.
And he pretty well hushed up then. But try to stick with the facts in this. That's the key. It's easy to speculate in that, and I do some speculating too. It's hard not to, but yeah, try to stick with the facts. Just like Joe Friday always used to say on Dragnet, stick with the facts. Just the facts.
Just the facts.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to trace cases, Ted Phillips is undoubtedly the best.
Right.
I mean, he's been doing this, oh gosh, since long before Blue Book was canceled.
Yeah, it sure was.
And getting back to UFOs, you guys have gotten some reports turned in to your organization too, correct?
Yeah, what it is, we have a new field investigator. She's Connie McNichols out of joined our organization last year, and she's also a researcher from MUFON. And what's helped is she is a member of our organization also with MUFON, and if we get a sighting report in, I'll notify Connie, and she'll take it and make out a report for us, but also send it to MUFON. You know, we share the information, you might say, and that helps out a lot. And she's really kind of, you might say, eager to get with it. Our one field investigator, he kind of burnt out at, he's been into it for years too, since 1989. After 20-some years, he figured, hey, let somebody else try to, file the reports and everything, and Connie's taken over, and she's done a real good job, although the other person also had done a good job before.
So what are some of the more interesting reports that have come your way?
Well, she's had most of the reports, but down in southern Ohio, they've had some reports over Portsmouth and that and things, but it's a good list of sightings and that MUFON has, and you can go to their database and they can list a lot of them. But we haven't had, around this area, we haven't had any for the really outstanding reports for maybe a year or so, but we get them from other areas and that, and Connie is in charge of several counties in central Ohio. Then our MUFON of Ohio, we have other investigators. It's just like when Fox News phoned me out of New York about the Texas sightings. They wondered what was going on down in Texas, and I told them, I said, well, we have Mutual UFO Network investigators down there, and we'll wait for their report, which then it did come back later and found out they even had radar returns on that. Some of the objects were heading toward President Bush's ranch in Crawford, Texas. And that never really came out in the newspapers, I don't believe, that was found out in later investigations. But over the years, here in the county, I've had like over 50 sighting reports here in the county. But it's still a lot of people keep it to themselves. It's still that enigma of not, feeling good to talk about it, and that, although it's really changed over the years. Before, if I'd reported my sighting when I was in high school, I would have probably been laughed out of high school. Nowadays, it's taken more seriously in that, and hopefully more and more people will come out with their sightings.
Well, if you listen to some of the latest polls and surveys, gosh, I hate to use the term believe, but the numbers of people who think UFOs are real and that they're here are starting to outnumber those who don't.
Now, I just take it, people say, well, you never convinced me about them. I say, hey, I'm not trying to convince anybody. If you want to hear about the UFO subject, here's what I got. And it's an impressive type of evidence we have over the years, and that it keeps going on and on, like my favorite quote is, knowledge is not a matter of belief or desire. Knowledge is a matter of evidence. And we have it. It's strong. My one lawyer friend said the weight of evidence is now so strong that there's something unexplained going on, that the burden of proof has switched the skeptics to prove there is nothing to it. And that's really, it's up to skeptics to prove there's nothing to it. And they keep coming up. You can always tell a skeptic. When they come on, they start grinning, and they'll kind of laugh, and that's their trademark.
I noticed that myself, and they can come up with some of the silliest, off-the-wall explanations.
Yeah, I know. I talked to Phil Klass before he passed away, and seen him a couple of conferences and that. And I had a notion to ask him, Phil, who are you being paid by? I mean, it doesn't matter. But I never asked him that. It's his job to do that, or he can't be that. I'm thinking to myself, he can't be that ignorant, can he? But then you never know. Everybody has an opinion, and I'll leave it go at that.
And the latest one, I think, to come forward as a skeptic who is, I lost all respect for him because I used to think he was really cool, and that's Bill Nye. He used to do a science show for kids that even my daughter liked.
Right.
And at the time my daughter wasn't into it. She still wasn't into the sciences, but she liked his show.
Right. I understand that.
And then he turns into this the skeptic that comes up with some really off-the-wall stupid explanations.
I think sometimes they have an ego. They like to think they know it all. Hey, I'm a scientist and this is how it's going on. Well, we know scientists have been wrong in the past, and that we're always gaining new information. You go back 100 years ago, and before the airplanes were invented and all that, and some scientists say, well, that would never happen. I'll never forget in the early days of doing research, some scientists come out and said a saucer-shaped craft would never be able to operate in the atmosphere. Well, now they're coming out and say, yeah, that is very feasible.
Well, all the stuff that I've read and looked up and whatnot, a disc shape is a very good aerodynamic shape.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And can handle higher speeds.
What's interesting here in the past few years now, they're saying about life in outer space. A lot of scientists say, well, no, there's no life in outer space, but now there's more and more coming out. Even the Vatican, I believe, was saying that, there's a good possibility that life is in outer space.
I was reading here recently, just in last couple of days, that the Vatican was wanting to do, or Vatican scientists, rather, were wanting to do some research on the possibility of extraterrestrial life.
That reminds me, isn't there a big telescope out there in Arizona that the Vatican, I think, put money into, and maybe Ohio State
Yes.
University has too, maybe?
Yes, it's up there near Tucson.
Okay, yes. And it's probably like the radio telescopes and that. We got a lot of them around, and one place in New Mexico, I believe it was, around Socorro, New Mexico, they got like 50 of them out there, radio telescopes, but over the years they say only one, 10-second communication they got, and they call it WOW, W-O-W. And
yes, the WOW signal.
Yeah, that came in at Ohio State University, their telescope. Wow. Okay, now stop and think now. With all them radio telescopes out there, and that's the only signal they've gotten, well, if it is, why even have them then? But another question I got to put to anybody is, if they would have picked up signals from outer space and that, would they tell the public? No, they won't.
That's in their mandate.
Yeah, and that's fine with me, but you got to use logic. They say, well, if somebody says they never picked up any signals, I said, well, if they did, would they tell you? That's that's what you have to think about as an individual. And I always tell people, I can talk about this subject for a long time, but each individual, you be the judge. Here's what information we got. Now, in your own mind, you make up your own decision. Don't have me make up your decision or anybody else, but you just do your own research, and that's what I would tell Bill Nye or anybody else. Have you done research on this subject? Or you're just going by being a skeptic, That's all.
Well, a lot of times I will point out what Edgar Mitchell said, Gordon Cooper.
Yeah.
you know, and Hynek. I mean, he went into it as a skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who can forget the famous swamp gas?
Yeah. What you have to remember about Hynek is, and one of my fellow members, he passed away now, God bless him, Dave Berlisle. He's a former Ohio State patrolman. Back in the early, it was around the same year, 1958, him and his fellow patrolman had a UFO sighting over by the Wilmington Post, daylight sighting. Well, they turned it into Hynek and that, I guess, and Hynek came back and said it was the planet Venus. And Dave was all upset. He said he'd never trust Hynek anymore at all, you know. Well, and like he said, though, is Hynek was being paid by the Air Force, and while he was paid by the Air Force, he put UFOs down, you know, he gave them explanations and that. When he wasn't paid by the Air Force, then he founded his own organization and started really checking in UFOs, and even said that he didn't get some of the real good UFO reports. They were just a public relations post, is what he said. So when he was denying UFOs existed, he was being paid by the Air Force, government contracts, and then when he turned about face, he wasn't being paid by the Air Force. He finally came around and said, yeah, they do exist. And like I say, you know, Hynek did a lot of good for the ufology.
I agree. He's like the top of my list.
Yeah, but you just have perspective why he denied it at first and then came around it. And see, this has a lot of Ohio connection, with Hynek being at the Ohio State University and then he went to Northwestern. But in the early days, he was at the Ohio State University, then the Patel Institute, one of the largest research organizations in the world. They're stationed right in Columbus. And we had Wright-Patterson Air Force Base right there, so very interesting.
You know, it seems to me, you know, speaking of swamp gas, you know, it seems to me that now it's flares are now the modern version of swamp gas.
Yeah, there was a case a couple years ago that we went out and we was having orange colored lights. We were kind of dropping in that. Well, me and John Fry, the chief researcher, we went out after a meeting one night and parked on a hillside overlooking the large part of Pickaway County, and we seen orange flare coming down. I was able to go to the local airport, and they gave me the number of the Springfield Ohio Air Guard Detachment, and there was F-16s dropping air flares. But because of that, though, checking with another neighbor, I had a real good UFO sighting report, where her and her daughter was out driving on a lonely road about 11:30 at night after a outdoor roast, you know, hot dog roast, and they was going home, and this object came out of the fog bank and hovered right over top of them. And she said, "I'll give you this report, but I don't want anything else to do with it." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that." And so it's when people have sightings like that, and like me, you know, you can argue all you want, but we know they exist. Now the question is that we ought to be asking ourselves, and some of us have, is where they come from, what's the purpose, and all that. And a lot of people say, well, you know, you're saying they're coming from outer space. No, I'm not saying that. But at the same time, you know yourself, D, out there in Arizona, nighttime you go outside, look up at the heavens and that, and see all of them stars and everything. And then you look at pictures of the Hubble spacecraft, right?
The deep field study.
Unbelievable. I mean, we're just such a minor speck in the solar system, right? In our solar system. But then out there, and that's why more and more scientists, I think, are coming out and saying, yeah, there's a possibility there is life on other planets. But these same scientists and that won't even look at a good UFO report. A lot of them are saying, well, yeah, let's go out there and explore. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe we've already been explored on. You have to think about that. And that's where a lot of these UFO reports would come in at.
We have a question from our virtual auditorium for you.
Okay.
Okay, this comes from Missing Time, and he asks, if you have ever witnessed or knows of witnesses who have seen a V-shaped triangle or boomerang.
I had a triangular shaped. I've had the two sightings I had in 1958. The one there going to the ball game, and that me and my buddy saw this red object hovering, then went down. Then later, a couple weeks later, me and my brother saw that. That was the main one. But then in August 21st of 1994, okay, I was working down at DuPont. I was up on the 5th floor working outside, It was about 10 o'clock at night again. I looked up, and the full moon was up there. As I looked up the full moon, I seen a large triangular-shaped craft went overhead. Excuse me. I was still in the Air Guard. I called the control tower at Rickenbacker Air Guard base, but they didn't have any reports. But yeah, I did see that object, and it was the one that was just about like the ones reported over Belgium and that. And it did have, let's see, it's a sighting. Yeah, out of the newspaper on February 22nd, they've had sightings at up there in eastern Ohio of a V formation of sightings. Yeah, they're still being seen. It seems like sometimes there's more V-shaped or triangular-shaped objects being seen than saucer-shaped.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Because it seems like the sightings are less disc-shaped anymore, and they're more triangular or this, V-shape or boomerang. I've heard it described various ways.
Yeah.
And then the long cylindrical shapes.
Yeah, that's true. And over the years, there's always been a lot of different shapes, objects, and that. There's no standard all the time in a saucer shape or triangular shape. There's a lot of different rectangular shapes, box shapes. It's unreal how it is. But advanced technology, who's to say what's going on?
And then when a lot of people say, well, how come there's so many different shapes, and sizes and configurations? Well, look at our own aircraft. Yeah.
Well, you ever stop thinking maybe it's because of different type entities coming down and visiting, different groups? I don't know. That could be.
Their technology's got to be advancing. Science doesn't stand still.
No, that's for sure. And some people say, why hasn't there been open contact? Well, that is a big question. Maybe there's a certain time period that's when they will make themselves known. But it's a theory in that it seems like they're trying to get us conditioned to accept them being real. I don't know. Instead of, coming out and landing at the White House, and a lot of people yourself would just go berserk and that, So maybe it's just a conditioning program, and that's what I think I'm maybe helping the government is in helping condition the public, their existence. Because one thing about it, Dee, and yourself, they're not going away.
Well, do you think that sightings such as Stevensville, O'Hare, Hudson Valley, all these mass sightings, could these be part of this
could very well
conditioning program?
Yeah. I think I mentioned to you before, here in the past couple months, I've made a list of the 50 of the top known UFO events. I don't know if you'd want me to go over those or...
Oh, definitely.
Just what you mentioned. You just mentioned a couple of them, of those cases. What I can do is start to go over them, and what I did it in chronological order. Started the earliest dates and that, and worked up. The last deal would be the Texas UFO sightings. But if you want me to, I can start over the list here. And any questions you have, just stop and just ask me. But the earliest I got is 1896, 1897 UFO sightings. Strange airships were observed in America's skies from coast to coast. You've heard about that, have you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that's, the earliest.
The Aurora, Texas comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. But, they seem like they're seen on the west coast and then just work their way across to the eastern coast. So that... it's still in a lot of newspapers out of that era, of strange sightings being seen in that. Okay, that was number one. Number two would be the Foo Fighters of World War II. During World War II, unidentified objects paced the American planes while in combat. It just seemed like they were observing our aircraft and that while they was on bombing missions or whatever. Leonard Stringfield was a good friend of mine. He passed away in 1994, but... he was considered the leading civilian expert on crash retrieval cases, and he was involved in going to the peace treaty signing in Japan. He was Army intelligence. He was going there. While he's flying there, three unidentified objects paced his airplane, and that's what got him interested in the subjects. So this was not only over Germany and that, but it was over in the Pacific area also, Foo Fighters being seen. And after the war ended, they found out that German and Japanese pilots also had been reporting seeing the strange objects. And at first they kind of thought they were the others' technology, which of course it wasn't.
I read Len Stringfield's account of his encounter with the Foo Fighters in Keith Chester's book, Strange Company, about the Foo Fighters. And
exactly. Yeah,
interesting read.
Really got friendly with Len because I took him to 3 different conferences, 2 in Chicago, 1 in Richmond, Virginia. And I know when I talked to Len about a week before he died on the telephone, I said, well, Len, one thing about it, you've left a legacy for UFO researchers and what he's done. Because he had a lot of military contacts and ex-military people that tell him about things that happened, but he wouldn't use their name. Some UFO researchers were upset about that, but I agreed with him. The only way you could get some of these reports was you tell them they would remain anonymous, which they have. But if you take these reports and put them all together, it shows you a real good story about what's been going on. I know before he passed away, I think there was over 40-some first-hand reports where the witnesses told him they either seen the bodies or the craft that we have in storage, you might say. It's quite a story, to say the least. And then he had over 200 or 300 second-hand reports of it.
What's next on the list?
Okay, Battle of Los Angeles.
Yes.
February 1942. An aircraft fire opened up on a large unknown object over Los Angeles. Very interesting case. Maybe some people have never heard about it, but what it is, we did our research, me and John Fry, and we went to the Ohio Library and got the L.A. Times report on it, right on the headlines. And the picture, you've seen the picture probably, haven't you, where like 7 searchlights are hitting that, or really more than that, about 9 searchlights hitting that object in the sky. Bruce McElvey did an analysis on the object in the photo, and you can see like a saucer-shaped craft up there. I had a friend of mine that was in the, he passed away a couple years ago in that, Harold Hoffman. He was stationed in the Army Guard out at Long Beach, California. And his story was in the paper about his life story in the military and that. He was out there in Long Beach when that Battle of L.A. opened up with all those Japanese airplanes. Well, I got to talk to Harold about it and that. He said, Peter, it was strange lights up there, but I never thought of them. We just took it to be Japanese aircraft. But you read the story and everything and that, and the one object hovered over L.A. for a couple hours, whatever. And, I mean, it's a known fact. We opened up anti-artillery because we had about 4 or 5 people killed, I believe. Some from heart attacks and others from maybe shells hitting them. So it's a case that really it's a part of the UFO lore, and some people still don't know it actually happened. But we have proof because, the newspapers and everything carried it. But at the time...
a few people on the ground were either injured by the falling debris of the anti-aircraft ammunition or heart attacks.
Yeah. I mean, they're so scared they thought Japanese were coming in, Next one would be the Kenneth Arnold sighting in June 1947, where private pilot Kenneth Arnold observed strange objects, and the flying saucer term got to be used. This we always call the modern day of flying saucer sightings, which later turned UFOs. But Kenneth always stuck to his story about the objects he'd seen flying over. They weren't really saucer-shaped. They were kind of like wing-shaped objects. He was in search of a downed aircraft, and he'd seen the objects flying by Mount Rainier, Washington. And he landed and told his story, and that really caught hold. That was June of 47, and a month later, of course, the most famous would be the Roswell crash. And the most famous case of crashed alien craft and bodies being discovered. The Coast to Coast radio program was on just 2 nights ago, I believe it was. Tom Carey and Don Schmidt, who I know and talked to, studying the Roswell case. They have another witness now, I guess. has come forward and said, yeah, he was in on the recovery team. See, more and more of these witnesses are coming forward as they're getting older or whatever, and, there it is.
Yeah, it's like Stanton Friedman says, we're trying to beat the mortician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I've talked to Stanton personally, too, before, and that, and of course, he's one of the leading proponents in the UFO study. That's for sure. The next one I have is the Thomas Mantell incident, January 7th, 1948. You've heard of that, have you? Or?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he was a military pilot, crashes while chasing an unknown object over Kentucky. The military later came out and said, well, what had happened, he'd lost oxygen. He went up too high while chasing a balloon. This Dave Berlau, who I told you about earlier, talking to Heineck about his sighting, he was down at Godman Field at Fort Knox, Kentucky, about a month after this Mantell case. Said he went up the control tower and told the air traffic controller up there, said, hey, what about this Mantell crash we'd seen? And the guy said, well, this object covered over the airfield and that. And right then a colonel stuck his head out of his office and said, you two men, just keep quiet, don't talk any more about it. And that was Dave's incident. Again, maybe he did chase a balloon and that, lose oxygen and that, but other people came forward and said, no, something else happened. And interesting enough, that same day up here, I said I was stationed at Rickenbacker Air National Guard Base. It used to be known as Lockbourne Air Base. That same day as the Mantell incident, we had a UFO flying over Lockbourne. It was reported later. So that was always an interesting connection.
Yes, it is.
Now, less than a month later, remember I told you about had a project due in high school about checking on UFOs, so I checked with a local farmer. Well, the local farmer was Bruce Stevenson. He'd had a sighting on February 1st, 1948. He's a very prominent farmer, and he had a close-up view of the object over his property. Now, he did not talk about this. He told some people, one person that worked for him, he told Jimmy Lee Master, who's my wife's uncle. Jimmy's passed away since, but he told Jimmy about it the next day, about the object he'd seen over the property and that. Well, I'm telling you this because he didn't go public with it until 4 years later when the famous sightings over Washington, D.C. happened, July of 52. Bruce was up to the local hardware store. He told the people up there, it's just like me coming out of my shell when the school teacher says why flying saucers don't exist. I said, well, they do. Well, Bruce was at the hardware store, and they were saying about them UFOs over Washington, D.C., and he said, well, I'll tell you about what I saw. Well, the local newspaper picked up on it and that, and Donald Kehoe even has listed in his book, along with Jacques Vallée, as his sightings. A very interesting sighting. Came within 100 feet of it. His wife lived to be 100 years old, Carolyn Stevenson. And
oh, wow.
She had Jimmy come to the rest home talk to her. Of course, Bruce died when he was about 70. But Carolyn wanted to tell me that, Pete, that Bruce, till the day he died, always said that thing did exist. I'll never forget Bruce telling me when I was interviewing him for that school project. I was only 18 at the time. So, well, Pete, you're young enough, maybe you'll find out what's going on. Well, I'm now 69 years old and still, well, what is going on? But I do know, the things there, the phenomena's there, and what does it all consist of? It surely isn't going away. Okay, there's Bruce Stevenson sighting. Number 8 I got down is the Childs Wittick plane sighting of July 24th, 1948. July 24th of 48. This commercial pilots observe a torpedo-shaped craft with the flames at the rear of it. This is a famous sighting, made local papers and everything. Let's see, going down through here.
Isn't that the one where they tried to explain it away as the constellation Orion?
It could have been. Yeah, that may have been.
If I remember correctly, the pilot said, that's the first time I ever had Orion fly under my left wing.
Yeah, and that's why I say, you be the judge. You hear these reports and then and get an explanation, and just like when Heineck told Dave Berlau that him and his partner saw the planet Venus, and Dave said it was a saucer-shaped craft they had seen in daylight and all that. Well, planet Venus don't look like that, but that's the best way to calm the public. I'm not sure. Okay, and number 9 would be the McNeville, Oregon pictures taken May 11th, 1950. A farmer took photographs of the saucer-shaped craft with a superstructure. there have been a lot of pictures taken of UFOs and all that, but this is one of the most famous ones. You heard of that before, have you? Farmer Paul Trent?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Pictures,
The photograph has been through just about every battery of analytical tests you can think of and has passed them all.
Yeah, that's for sure. So there it is there, and now him and his wife are both have passed away, but just like Bruce Stevenson, they stuck to their story till the day they died, and of course he had pictures to show it. And after that would be another famous pictures. Number 10 would be Lubbock Lights pictures of August 1951. Have you ever heard about those?
Yes.
An 18-year-old took pictures of mysterious light formations appeared in the sky, and he photographed them. This had occurred on several nights, I guess, where a flight, like a V-shaped lights, individual lights were flying overhead, and the 18-year-old took pictures of it, and that. The Air Force came out and said that was a flock of birds going overhead. And there's a lot of geese that flies over my house. I've never seen any of them in perfect V formation. None. Have you ever seen a perfect V formation of birds?
No.
No.
And not the way these lights are arranged either.
Yeah, you've seen pictures of that then.
Oh, yes, I'm familiar with it.
Okay. Okay,
I'm a UFO history buff.
No.
So.
I guess we're really telling the people listening to us, that there is a lot of cases, famous cases never been solved. They're still unknown, but you have to classify as UFO. Another one, number 11, would be the Nash-Fortenberry plane sightings on July 15th, 1952. It's where a pilot and co-pilot reported observing strange objects over Chesapeake Bay. That's a real good illustration of, like there's in one graphic, there's 6 circular objects within a rectangle, you might say, flying overhead, and another one with 2 following behind it. This made the newspapers and all that. It was a pretty interesting sighting. Remember, what I'm talking about here is the 50 top known UFO events. There's been plenty of sighting reports that have kept quiet. I'm sure a lot of commercial pilots, military pilots, have seen these. They keep quiet for one reason or another. The lack of their job or wanting to gain rank in the military. And, you report these sightings, and that may enter your career or whatever. But that's part of the process. If that's the way it's supposed to be, no problem. But I'm just telling you, there's been a lot of good sighting reports. Of course, number 12 would be the Washington, D.C. sightings of July 19th and 26th, 1952. This was unknown objects over the nation's capital with a radar visual case. Seeing the objects in the sky and picked them up on radar. This really made the headlines around the country. Still never explained what the,
and the Air Force even kind of, the only thing I can think of to express it is jerked, mental pause here. The guy that was in charge of Blue Book at the time, Ruppelt.
Oh yeah, Captain Ruppelt.
They really jerked that poor guy around those, when that was happening.
You ever have his book?
Yes, I do.
I got 2 copies of it. Hold on to it. That's all I can tell you. It's an excellent book in that. Of course, the second one was revised somewhat. They had him, and Captain Ruppelt, he had health problems, I guess, because he only lived to be about 40-some years old. He didn't live very long for a normal lifespan. Yeah, he talked about that in cases. Very interesting. Number 13, I got the Kinross Air Force Base incident, November 23rd, 1953. This is a case where, have you heard about this before?
Yeah.
Okay. Where some the public may not want to hear this, but we had lost an aircraft as the radar showed it merging with UFO over Lake Superior, and that was a very famous case. They never did find the pilot or the airplane since. They had
or its backseater.
Yeah, the backseater. They came out about a year and a half ago or so. This salvage company up in the Great Lakes tried to say that they discovered the airplane and that, but they didn't have the right aircraft number on it. So never.
Well, the one that was supposedly had the sonar imaging of the plane on the bottom of the lake, that turned out to be a hoax.
Right. It was more or less a hoax. And that's why I say that's what you have to watch out in this research is some people can lead you on that, and you may spend a lot of time on a certain case, find out it was a hoax. But that's part of the deal.
But the incident itself is real. It's just this bunch of people saying they found it.
Yeah,
that part was a hoax.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure everybody got that straight.
Yeah. Like the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when the movie started, they was checking the aircraft numbers on that lost Flight 19, and this is the real one, and that was part of the movie. 19, that was real interesting. Number 14, I got a case here that really hasn't been investigated that much. I'd like to get more details on it, but I thought I'd list it as Marysville, Ohio angel hair case, October 22nd of 1954, where a children principal at elementary school observed a UFO and then angel hair coming down. I thought that was a very interesting case. Phyllis Buddinger's our chemist analysis. She's been on History Channel on that before. She lives up by Chagrin Falls, Ohio. She's a good friend of mine in that. She has done work on angel hair cases and finds very interesting results.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to take a break right now, and we can come back to this list because I'm enjoying this.
Yeah,
this list is awesome. But we need to take a break. We'll be back here in 8 to 9 minutes.
Okay.
With more of Pete Harvenger and on Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis, here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
It's really pronounced Hardinger.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, Hardinger. Yeah. Okay.
Your host, Deandrew.
And welcome back to Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis, here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, also broadcast live on UPRN 105.5 New Orleans. I'm your host, Deandrew, and tonight my guest is Pete Hardinger.
Hardinger, right.
Hardinger, okay. Make sure I got it right. I apologize for saying it incorrectly.
No problem.
I hate doing that with a passion. Gosh. Oh, and before we went to the break, you were giving us a rundown of your list of the 50 top sighting history.
Right, what I consider the 50 top known UFO events. Want me to continue then, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, and number 15 would be the RB-47 radar visual case. Happened July 17th, 1957. The U.S. Air Force equipped an electronic RB-47 received signals from a UFO. Now, we talk about listening posts we have trying to pick up signals from outer space and all that, the SETI program. This was an actual case, and Stanton Friedman has even talked about it, where the RB-47 was flying, I think, off over the Gulf of Mexico up through Mississippi, Louisiana, and that. It was on like 3 or 4 hours. They had this UFO following him. Followed the aircraft, and they even picked up electronic signals from the UFO. And that is a very significant sighting that happened back then. So that may be not known to a lot of people.
Well, that particular plane was testing some new in-aircraft radar systems, weren't they?
Yeah, they very possibly could have. Yeah, been doing that. But, however it was leaked out to the public, and that's one of the big cases that we consider. Number 16, like I had talked before, was the Lebanon, Texas sightings, November 3rd, 1957. Several automobiles experienced engine failures caused by a nearby UFO. That was really the first UFO case I'd really heard about in that, and as a 17-year-old, I was very interested in it. And within just a few months later, I had my own UFO sighting. But Lebanon, Texas was a very famous case of a sighting. In fact, Don old Burleson with MUFON even investigated that case later. And just a few years ago, he said he had found out that the local sheriff was also involved in that. His car engine also went out. So
I was unaware of that.
Yeah, that's true. And Don lives out in New Mexico. He's a real good researcher. Number 17 be the Trinidad Island case, January 1958, just a month before I had my sighting. And photographs of UFO by Brazilian Navy during their scientific research. These are photographs by an official Brazilian scientist and that. Off the coast of Brazil is where it was happened at. Famous pictures taken of it, and it's always listed as unknown. Like a lot of the others listed as unknown deal. Number 18 would be the Father Gill sightings, June 26 and 27, 1959. A very famous case. Have you heard of this one before? Father?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah. Occupants of UFOs hovering and ground witnesses exchange hand waves. Imagine that. Yeah.
And didn't Father Gill also, because this happened over the course of several nights, and during one of those, he was just like, oh, it's time for dinner. I'm going to go eat my dinner. Right.
Really, what else can you do, I guess? You're looking at it and that, and but me, I thought I'd stay there all night looking at it, but yeah, you're right. I think he said he had to go eat his dinner, but occupants on the UFO was out on their deck, and they waved to the ground witnesses, and they waved back. Excuse me. So that'd be a famous sighting. Of course, number 19 would be the Barney and Betty Hill case. September 19, 1961. It was the first known public abduction case involving occupants in an automobile. That's, Betty and Barney, that made a movie made of it and that.
Oh, yes. Again, that's one of my, another one of my favorite cases.
Absolutely. Now, this next one would be the Socorro, New Mexico incident, April 24th, 1964. Police officer Lonnie Zamora sees an egg-shaped object on ground with occupants nearby. Now, I just made a news article on this one. It's on the website. Lonnie Zamora passed away in November of last year. So I made a UFO sighting news article about him. What's a famous case there is he saw the couple people, the small people on the ground. They also saw a symbol on the craft, egg-shaped. So that was a very famous case.
I apologize for any noise that's being heard off in the background. I live in an apartment complex, and there's some people outside. So that's kind of coming through. I apologize.
No problem. I think my phone happens to go dead. I may have to get it charged up again, but I had a beep on my phone. But so if I lose you, call me back again. I'll pick up the other phone. Okay. So it's for a New Mexico case. The other one would be Vandenberg Air Force Base case, September 15th, 1964. Film of an Atlas rocket launch. A UFO appeared beside it and destroyed it. This is a famous case where the officer came forward and talked about it. 22 would be the Rex Heflin pictures. August 1965, the picture of the daylight UFO sighting by California highway employee. Famous pictures of that. I don't know if you've ever seen those or not.
Oh, yes.
These, we have a lot of good cases in that being listed here. A lot of the public didn't know about, maybe. Next one would be the Exeter, New Hampshire incident, September 3rd, 1965. Police officers observe a huge object over a farm with animal reaction. We had a lot of cases where animals do react to sightings, and this was one of the famous cases in that. The man that reported, I'd seen him on a TV show a few years back. He regrets he ever reported the incident because of the harassment he got at the time, but that was a famous case. Next would be the Exeter, New Hampshire incident. Police officers observe a huge object over... Okay, I'm sorry. I'll read one over that.
I was going to say, we covered Exeter already.
Yeah. Let me get my other phone in case this one won't stop.
Okay.
Let me get the other phone right here. Yeah, I'm almost there.
The Exeter case, the kid that reported...
Okay, go ahead. I got you now.
The Exeter, New Hampshire case, the kid that reported it, and I could never pronounce his name to save my life.
Muscalero or some name, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
He was getting ready to join the military just days before or days after this incident happened.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Okay, yeah, because he was, I think, only, 18 or so.
He was just out of high school.
Okay. Then 24 would be the Kecksburg, Pennsylvania crash, December 9th, 1965. Recovery of a strange object that crashed in the woods with witnesses. Now, that definitely was a recovery of that object. And Stan Gordon has done a real good job on that, reporting that. Interesting with us is, being stationed at Rickenbacker for several years, the story was that they brought the object on a flatbed truck from Pennsylvania, stopped over at the back gate of Rickenbacker, then the next day it went on to Wright Pat. Witnesses came forward about that. And number 25 is your swamp gas case.
Oh, yes.
Hillsdale, Michigan sightings, March 21st, 1966. Swamp gas explanation by J. Allen Hynek for UFO sightings is ridiculed. He probably became more famous by that case than any other, just about.
This is true, and this is also the case that triggered the congressional hearings on UFOs.
True. That's true.
Like Gerald Ford.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who became president. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Number 26 is another Ohio case, Portage County, Ohio police chase, April 17th, 1966. A bright lit object is chased by Ohio police officers into Pennsylvania. This is a famous case that was portrayed in the Close Encounters movie, where the police officers are chasing a UFO.
Yes.
And they chase it for a good while. But Deputy Spaur, S-P-A-U-R, was his name, and he got ridiculed by that and about him reporting that sighting, and he later left the police force and got divorced and all that because of it, so it left a bad mark on him. Nowadays, if a sighting report would be like that, I think different UFO groups maybe come to his defense. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Another number 27, I don't know if you've heard about this one or not, Stephen Michalak, burn marks, May 20th.
Oh, in Canada.
Yeah, he had them burn marks on his chest. I wouldn't think he'd put on himself, but it was May 20th, 1967. Canadian suffers burn marks on his chest while examining a UFO close-up. So I thought that definitely would make one of the cases also. Number 28 was the mounts from Air Force Base missiles.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, I still got you.
Oh, okay, we lost you there for a moment.
Okay. Mounts from Air Force Base missiles in 1967. Sudden shutdown of about 20 nuclear missiles while UFOs are nearby. Very famous case. The officer came forward on the Disclosure Project at the Washington Press Conference and talked about that. Number 29 was the Shag Harbor, Canada case, October 4th, 1967. Many witnesses observed a UFO enter water with retrieval efforts were useless. Later reported the object moved underwater and left the area. So another famous case. Number 30 would be Delphos, Kansas trace case, December 2nd, 1967. Unknown object leaves a glowing gray-white circle on the landscape. That's made the History Channel, and that I believe Ted Phillips was involved in that.
Very much so.
Yeah, that was one of his early cases. Minot Air Force Base sightings of October 24th, 1968. It's where base personnel and a B-52 crew with radar returns observed UFO in vicinity. This is the case where the control tower notified a B-52 that was nearby about seeing a UFO. The B-52 crew saw it, and they had radar returns from it also.
Wow, that one I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, Minot Air Force Base, October 24, 1968. The next one, always be very interesting. October, I put these in one group, October 1973 sightings. October 1973 was the most massive wave of reporting UFO sightings in the U.S. in 1 month. Something occurred there. We had sightings all over the country. We had, yeah. So what happened in October 73, you just have to wonder. Two of the cases out of that was the Pascagoula, Mississippi incident, October 11th, 1973, where two men were taken aboard a UFO while fishing from the dock of at a shipyard. If you remember that case, they claimed they were taken on board, and they've stuck to their story ever since.
One of them had a nervous breakdown from it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Let's see who that. Hold on just a minute. Yeah, that was Calvin Parker. He was 19 at the time. So, well, you just stop and think. You're going along with your life and all that, and all of a sudden, an incident like this happens, and you just, your belief systems just change completely around.
Oh, definitely.
You say, hey, these things are real, and especially if a case were, taken aboard a UFO, then really be a, change of your belief system. The other case during this time period would be the Coyne helicopter sighting, again in Ohio, by Mansfield, October 18th, 1973. U.S. Army helicopter crew observes a UFO along with ground witnesses. You've heard of this before, I guess.
Oh, yes.
What's interesting about this is Captain Coyne, along with 3 crew members. Captain Coyne, the military thought so much of that case that, of him, he got promoted to major later on. So what I'm saying is they didn't hold it against him. Number 35 be the Travis Walton case. November 5, 1975. A man disappears for 5 days, claims to have been abducted by aliens.
I have met Travis, and that is a very interesting case. All those guys passing the lie detector test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And that's what I say a lot of these cases. A person makes a wild statement, okay, you want to take a lie detector test or whatever, and see what they say then. Number 36, I got here another interesting case, Allagash incident, August 1976. Men realized they were abducted while on a fishing trip years ago. Excuse me.
I've met 2 of the men that were involved with that. Another very interesting abduction case.
2 of them were twin brothers. And they said the aliens kind of took interest in the twin brothers, looking the same, I guess. But yeah, they didn't realize till years later, I guess, they started thinking about it. And what they said was interesting when they left the campfire site to go out on the boat trip to come back. The logs were burning and everything. When they came back, it was just ashes, so that they knew they'd been gone longer time than they thought. And then they started getting recollections of the case years later. Number 37 would be the Iran incident, September 18th, 1976. Iranian F-4's instruments malfunction. It engages UFOs near Tehran, Iran. That's when they were more or less our allies. So that was a famous case that happened back then.
And he was flying one of my favorite aircraft, an F-4 Phantom.
That's odd you said that, because when I read that, I was just thinking, when I was with the Air Guard up there, I worked on operations, taking care of books and all that, but I got to fly with them on the refueling outfit. And the F-4s was one of my prettiest planes coming up when they come up to refuel with us. Yeah, I love that F-4. So that's interesting you said that.
They're a beautiful bird.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, absolutely. Next case is a disturbing case, okay? Frederick Valatic case of October 21st, 1978. Private pilot disappears over the water after an encounter with UFO down by Australia. You've heard of that case, I believe.
Yes, I have. I've even heard the air traffic control recordings of the radio transmissions in this case.
I'll never forget, I was with Len Stringfield at one of the conferences. I can't say for sure, but I believe it was Bill Chackers, an Australian researcher.
Oh, Bill Chalker.
Chalker, okay. Yeah, he came up to Len and told him, said, Len, we have ground witnesses now to that case where they've seen the UFO in the aircraft. So, it is disturbing, but, that's part of the UFO deal. Yeah, he disappeared over the water. Next one is number 39, is the Bentwaters Woodbridge, England case. December 28, 1980, airmen, including the base commander, witnessed UFO outside the back gate. And this is where, Air Force personnel have come forward and said, yeah, the UFO definitely was no lighthouse.
I now have met 2 men that were involved in that incident.
Is that right?
And they to this day, when they talk about it, you can hear the emotion in their voice, and you hear how much it has affected them. And
Oh, no doubt.
That was Larry Warren and Jim Burroughs.
Okay.
Or John Burroughs, rather, excuse me.
Steve Peterson was his name. Peniston. He's the one
John Peniston.
He said he touched the object.
Yes.
I believe. See, he didn't say that until a few years later, but I guess he just come forward and said, yeah, I actually touched it. It's about like that Maliki case, or when he got burned by it.
Yes. This description, I've heard a very in-depth description of the object that Peniston observed and touched here this last November at the Crash Retrieval Conference. They had, excuse me, Burroughs there in a recording of Peniston telling his description of this object, and the detail is just amazing.
Yeah, it would be. Okay, after that, I got the Cache Landrum incident, December 29th, 1980, which is one day after Bentwalder's. You know, the huge diamond-shaped object causes radiation-like burns to witnesses.
Yes.
And she died later on. She never did recover, I don't think, from her burns. But, yeah, that was a famous case, the diamond-shaped object. What was interesting about that case, then a lot of helicopters show up later. It's like they escort the diamond-shaped craft away. So, you know, that's always makes you wonder what occurred with that. And number 41, I got the Hudson Valley, New York sightings, 1983. Many witnesses cite triangular-shaped craft over a long period of time. That's where they come out and said, well, there was private aircraft were flying in a triangular-shaped over the area, and that, you know. We have a couple witnesses that moved out of New York, and they live down by Athens now. They're a member of our organization. They came to a meeting and said there was a lot more going on in Hudson Valley, New York, than was ever reported in the papers or anything, because they lived up there, and then a lot of sightings were going on, and they weren't those light aircraft. So
that one I hadn't heard of.
Yeah, Hudson Valley.
Oh, the Hudson. Okay, was it? Oh,
Hudson
never mind.
Valley.
I was mental pause. You're right. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Hudson Valley.
Hudson Valley. And that went on for months.
Yes, it did. Long period of time. Yeah, sure did. Number 42, I got the Japanese cargo plane sighting. November 17th, 1986, a Saturn-shaped mothership is witnessed by a Japanese plane over Alaska. The drawing I have of this is a huge UFO, probably about, I'd say maybe 100 times bigger than the aircraft itself. And a Japanese air crew saw that one.
And there's also a paper trail of evidence for this one as well.
Yeah. All people have to do is do your own research, and there it is, you know. Yeah, some of it may be fake papers or whatever, you know. In some case, there's hoaxers out there, you know, and maybe they're being paid to do it or whatever, to hoax sightings. Or some of them are just want to do it for the fun of it. But, the evidence is out there, and that's why going over these different sightings, it's amazing what we really do have. Number 43, you may not have heard about this. It's an Ohio sighting, Lake Erie, Ohio Coast Guard sighting, 1988. A UFO with small objects emerging hovers over the lake, causing ice to crack. This was a couple, man and wife was driving down the highway close to Lake Erie. They seen an object out over the lake. They stopped at the Coast Guard station up there. Coast Guardsmen came out. They seen the object hovering over the lake, and they heard the ice cracking and seen several small objects emerging from it and going back in the object. So that happened in 1988.
You're right. That's one I hadn't heard.
Let's see. It was March 4th, 1988. Yeah, March 4th of 88. Yeah, you hadn't heard about that probably.
Nope, I hadn't.
Yeah, so I had that on there. Number 44, I got the Belgium Triangle sightings, November 1989. Wave of triangular-shaped UFOs are seen by civilian and military personnel. Interesting about this, from a personal deal, is we got a sighting report from a young man in his early 20s down along the Ohio River. he sent in a triangular-shaped craft that he'd seen by a power plant down there. He sent it to us. About a week later, we seen drawings of the Belgium sightings, and it almost matched it perfect. And this was seen down, in southern Ohio.
Interesting.
Then number 45, we have the American West Airlines sighting, 1995. A crew observes a rectangular-shaped UFO near clouds while flying over Texas. This is where they had a thunderstorm and that, and the air crew looked out over the clouds and that, and when lightning happened, they seen a large rectangle-shaped craft was flying not far off. That made the sightings. Number 46 is the Yukon Territory sightings in December 11th, 1996. Have you heard about this before? Yukon.
I think so.
It was a giant UFO seen by over 20 witnesses in the Yukon Territory, Canada. This was in the MUFON Journal and that. I mean, it was a huge object seen up there. Big time. We're getting close to the end here. Number 47, I got the Phoenix, Arizona sighting, 1997. Large triangular-shaped craft over Arizona, and its excuse is military flares. You know about this case, of course.
Oh, definitely.
What it is, they got confusion. I think it was done on purpose. They said these lights, the Phoenix lights, what they're known as. These lights are actually military flares, and that, which I believe they were. But we're talking about totally different time for this. About 2 or 3 hours earlier, a large triangular-shaped craft was seen flying over Arizona. And Governor Symington's had a press conference, had his chief aide come out dressed up like an alien. They made fun of the situation. And just a few years ago, Governor Symington went before the UFO Disclosure Project and said no, he had seen the craft himself. And why did he make fun of it? So he wouldn't cause panic with the people. So this is a pretty good case here, wasn't it?
Yes, definitely. And I was going to wait until the end of the program to announce this, but since you brought it up, I'll go ahead and do it now.
Okay.
On Thursday, March 4th at 7 p.m. Central Time, I will be doing a pre-recording with Phoenix Lights witness Mike Fortson. It will also be re-aired on Saturday, March 13th, which is the 13th anniversary of the 1997 sightings.
Yeah, that's interesting. I told you before I had, for about 10 years, I had UFOs on my license plate. On my van, we was traveling out it was in Missouri at the time. We stopped at a candy store in Missouri. A couple came up to us, seen the license plate, and said, "Oh, you're interested in UFOs?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm a researcher." He said, "Well, me and my wife know they exist because we've seen those Phoenix lights, and they weren't no flares. It was a large triangular craft." I said, well, "Have you reported this to anybody?" "No, never have." So say, there was a lot of other witnesses out there, too, that never talked about it.
Well, at the time, there was approximately 1.5 million people living in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a potential of 1.5 million witnesses to this event. And there's very few that have come forward out of that many people.
Yeah.
So, like we were discussing during the break, you were a guesstimate, for each sighting that's reported, there's 10 that go unreported.
Yeah, that's true. But let me bring up something else, too, though, Dee. It's like people say, well, I've never seen a UFO sighting in that. I said, well, when you walk outside and all that, walk around that, are you looking up in the sky? Because there's been cases, and just like in the Phoenix case, UFOs fly right overhead. If you're not looking up, you're not going to see it.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and that's what's happened in a lot of cases.
That's why I call my program Eye to the Sky.
Yeah, oh yeah, and with the truckers and that, yeah, they are eyes to the sky. I always thought that the truckers out there going across the country, boy, especially out west when the wide open spaces, things you can see.
Oh, definitely. I've driven, between Idaho and California, and Idaho and New Mexico, and Idaho and Arizona.
Oh.
And, yeah, there's some stretches of road where there's absolutely nothing but sagebrush and bunny rabbits for miles and miles and miles.
No doubt, yeah. It's wide open spaces. Well, number 48, I got the Illinois police sightings, January 5th of 2000. I always like to say this was the first major sighting of the new millennium, January 5th, 2000, out in Illinois, where at the start of the new millennium, several police departments see a strange object. This was like, 4 or 5 different police departments, I believe, saw it. It was first reported by a man that was going to the golf course or something to check on it. I forget exactly what he was doing, but he saw the object, reports to the police, and then they started picking up on it. And, they followed for several miles, different police departments. So that was a famous sighting. Of course, like we talked about earlier now, the number 49, I got the Chicago O'Hare Airport sighting November 6th, 2006. Airport personnel in daylight observed a saucer-shaped UFO hovering above. A very good case up in Chicago. They say, and you've heard about this case.
Oh, yes.
The object was hovering over the airport in what was a cloudy day, and when the object shot up into the air, it cleared the clouds out, and you could see the blue sky up above. It just created a hole in the sky, you might say, but clearing out the clouds and the heat from it or whatever. You could see the blue sky up there. And as reported by several, I think it was United Airlines.
The United Airlines terminal, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Gate workers saw it, pilots saw it,
yeah.
People in the terminals saw it.
Yeah.
Interesting case.
I could bring this up about when people say, well, why wouldn't they tell other people? Well, it's their job in a way. I'll never forget, a few years back, I was out in Las Vegas. My wife used to go out there once a year, sitting at a casino, New York casino, sitting down, and a middle-aged woman sat down beside me playing the slot machine beside me. And on the back of her light coat, she had air traffic controllers. And I got talking to her. I said, oh, you're out here? She said, yeah, we have a meeting out here and that, and talked a few minutes while I was playing the slot machines. And I said, well, what do you think about the UFO phenomena? She said, oh, yeah, it's real. I said, oh, yeah. I said, oh, yeah. I said, we get reports in every so often that we just keep ourselves. Oh, okay. Well, after a bit, I said, well, I'm a UFO researcher. Indeed, she got up and left, which, I don't blame her. I didn't.
Well, they're told not to talk.
Yeah, I didn't take her name. I didn't want her name. But it just showed me that, yeah, it's there. And you're told not to talk. And I'd say the same thing, being in the military, and that if an event would have happened when I was in the military and that I was told not to talk about it, that's what would happen. I wouldn't talk about it. Security oaths and all that, take that very much in high regard. All I'm telling people is, hey, look, this is real, so it's no use to make fun of it. It's really happening, and, just keep that in mind. And of course, go ahead.
I do just agreeing with you, definitely.
Okay. You say you do disagree?
No, I said I agree with you.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you said what? You're prior Navy?
I'm ex-Navy, yes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but just to let the people know and try to help condition them. I think that's what you're doing too. Is helping condition the population. And, hey, this subject is real. Well, number 50, I got the Stephenville, Texas sightings, January 8th, 2008, where radar returns give credits to witnesses seeing UFO in Texas airspace. Like I say, Fox News called me up, wanted to know what was happening down there. And I said, well, we have MUFON investigators. They'll find out. They did a real good investigation. But going down there, they had a meeting. They're a small town outside Stephenville, I believe it was. They had several witnesses come forward. But some of them didn't talk about the Stephenville case. They was talking about the sightings they'd had years before or whatever. And this is what happens a lot of times. I've gone out on cases. They say, well, I didn't really see this, but I'll tell you what I've seen, years prior or whatever. So what I tell the public is, by your own research, just do the one-on-one. Ask people, take them by, just you and that person, ask them what they think of the UFO phenomenon, and you may get some very interesting remarks.
You've just made a lady in our virtual auditorium very happy.
Oh, is that right?
Angela, that one was for you.
Okay.
Angela Joyner is in our virtual auditorium.
Okay.
She was the journalist for the newspapers that first broke the story.
Well, you said that name. I knew that name. I hadn't remembered. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Yeah, that's true.
She has a program here on the same network, on UFO Paranormal Radio Network, called The Joyner Report. It airs on Friday night.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. Does she still live down with Stephenville, or do you know?
I believe so. Angela, you're in the room. You can answer that. Just typing away. Yes, she lives near there. Yes.
Oh, good, man. I got a nephew made to go to college down there. I had another nephew, his brother, graduate from down in Stephenville a couple of years ago. So, yeah, I've heard that town before. I've never got down there before, but if I ever do, I'll look her up and probably have some interesting comments. Yeah.
It is a very, very interesting case. And again, like we were saying, all these mass sightings, I think that's what they're doing, is they're saying, okay, here we are, to get a good look, take your pictures, and we'll move on.
Well, just like every so often they'll come by. These 50 dates I went through, several of them were, spaced apart. It's like they're saying, well, they're kind of letting up on us reporting about us. Let's do another flyby or whatever. That's just speculation, but you wonder about it. But tell Angela what got me. See, I served at Fort Hood, Texas for 2 years when I was in the Army, so I got some Texan in me, you might say. Now, I loved it when that one guy was, I think, maybe threatened by the military to shut up. He said, hey, we down here in Texas, we don't shut up. We know what we saw. So I have to give that guy credit,
She said that was Ricky Sorrell.
Okay, yeah, that was cool. But
yeah, I have to admit, there's some damn good cases you've got there. I mean,
appreciate it.
Every one of those was very significant. And,
it was, yeah.
And gosh, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, like I said before, that's the known cases. I bet that list, if we knew all the other cases in that, those 50 there, maybe a few of them would make the top 50 of the others. But because there's probably some famous cases out there we've never heard of, and they've just covered up. And maybe it's supposed to be that way or not, I don't know. Ask a question to Angela. What did she think about UFOs before she got onto this case? What was happening in Stephenville? What was her opinion about UFOs?
Actually, just last night, she was, and she's reiterating it here, not interested.
She wasn't interested, okay.
Until the Stephenville thing came out. And then just last night, she and her husband were talking about how they were invited to this place in, I believe it was Oregon,
yeah,
where they're having sightings there all the time. And
right?
They got to see something.
Oh.
These bright orange.
Did Angela get to see them, or?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, her husband had to stop her from trying to go after him because it was dark and it was a steep hill. And he didn't want her to fall and break her neck.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, she had an interesting sighting, and gosh, I mean, she's like getting a crash course in ufology.
Yeah, she's really interested now. See, psychology plays a big part of this. I'll tell you a personal case happened to me if I have time. Yeah, I was stationed in Texas at Fort Hood. Okay. My close relation of mine came down, and me and my wife, I got married after I was down there a year, brought my wife back to Texas, and had a close relationship down to visit us and that. He went down to see a friend in San Antonio, and me and my wife rode with him. His wife, and 2 boys were with him. We drove down to San Antonio. That night we were coming back, and I had to go to the base early the next day, and I was about half asleep in the back seat of the car. All of a sudden I heard him and his wife holler out, "What was that?" Everything woke up, and I said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "Oh, a meteor just flashed over the car." I said, "Well, it did." I said, "Yeah." And I remember her asking, do you have enough gas? "Oh, yeah." And I always remember that. Boy, they got all excited, and just a meteor passed over. Okay, now we jump back. From there, we go up, say, 30 years, okay? This happened in August 1965, okay? Okay, we go back up, it was around 10 years ago, in 1998, say, 33 years after the fact. Okay, and move on, Journal, I see where Texas Highways is going to do, that's the magazine down in Texas, Texas Highways. They're going to do an article about MUFON that's located in Seguin, Texas, right outside San Antonio. They're going to do an article about it. I got a sister that lives down at Perryton, Texas, at the tip of the Panhandle. So I called her up and asked her, hey, could you send me that Texas Highways magazine? And she did, okay. And in the start of the article, it says, in August of 1965, several UFOs were seen over Texas and Oklahoma. I take this article to the guy, my close relative, and say, hey, that's the time period that you said, that meteor passed overhead. You know what he told me? He said, Pete, that was no meteor. I said, what do you mean it was no meteor? He said, that was a craft that we seen, an unknown craft flew over our car. I said, you mean to tell me after all these years, I've been involved in UFO research, you never told me? He said, I never really thought of it, to tell you. I was afraid people would think I was drinking or whatever. I said, well, no. So this is the psychology part of UFO phenomena. People are, unless they see something to back them up, then they'll tell about it. It's like these people met down there outside Stephenville, talk about Stephenville sightings. Well, I'll tell you what I seen years ago. That's what I'm saying. They open up. And until Angela, that's the big part of this, the psychological part. They feel at ease, and they'll start telling me about what they've seen.
Angela has a question for you.
Okay.
She would like to know what you think of the radar report for the Stephenville case and why you think nobody has paid attention to it.
Well, I thought it was very, very interesting. I belong to MUFON that, and I've seen the report in MUFON Journal. And I thought it was very significant, especially one of the craft, whatever is heading toward Crawfordsville, President Bush's home. But tell Angel, that's part of this enigma is about newspapers and that. I know over the years of my research and that with the radio stations and that, they may call me up, say we're interested in this UFO deal, and then I never hear about from them again. In fact, I'm waiting on a TV station that's supposed to interview me and the Roundtable UFO Society. Whether or not they do it or not, I don't know. But over the years, it seems like, speculating again, okay, did somebody stop the newspapers or the radio station or TV stations from continuing on? I don't know. Maybe this is part of the cover-up. I have no idea.
That's a possibility. But I've been noticing, though, in mainstream media, for the most part, are starting to get rid of the giggle factor. They're starting to report this seriously instead of making a joke out of it.
We know what? Angela's a big part of this. What she's been doing, she's a big part of it. It's people like her, if they can realize, hey, this is a serious subject or whatever, and not be taken lightheartedly, to let people know that something is going on and has been going on for years. Yeah, that's what it needs.
Oh gosh, what we need is a news crew out doing a live report somewhere, and something come down and just kind of hover there for a little while, and so they get some good video footage of it.
Yeah, that's a good question, but you know what, though, Dee? It's all up to them.
This is true.
I mean, it's up to them how much they want them to be observed. If they want to do a flyover in a certain period, what's their agenda? That's the big question. What is their agenda?
And then a comment was just made in the virtual auditorium that I think is very valid. Gossamer says that, in the scenario I just put forth, saying that, indeed, they would kill the feed. Yeah,
I know. There is some dark side to ufology, I'll admit that. But it's just that I just want people to acknowledge, hey, this does exist, and, you can laugh at the subject if you want to, but you don't know what you're laughing at. That's for sure.
This is true.
Just do your own research about it and go to the webpage of us, the Roundtable UFO Society, go to the different links or whatever, and there's a lot of information right there, including
and the address for Roundtown.
Yeah, it's Roundtown UFO Society, Post Office Box 52, Circleville, Ohio 43113.
And the website?
Yeah, it'd be roundtownuFOsociety.com.
Fantastic. Everybody go check that site.
When I
the stuff that's on there is really good, and gosh, I mean, so much good information there.
It's just for, let the public know, what we know has been going on for years and that, and with other, Richard Haynes has that aircraft reporting site. I mean,
yes.
I went over a couple reports there from aircraft crews. I'm sure there's a lot of others been out there, that he's got too.
And he deals only aircraft and
yeah, right. He does aircraft.
Some of the reports he's got is amazing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, let's see. We've got less than a minute to go. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our audience?
No, just if they have any questions for me, send it's Rufo, RUFOS at Columbus.rr.com is my email address, and either send me a letter or the hotline number is 740-477-6252. I'll be glad to talk to you about it.
Fantastic. And that's all the time we have for tonight.
Okay.
I'd like to thank you for joining us again tonight. And Pete, and again, I apologize for pronouncing your name incorrectly.
No problem.
I hate doing that.
Yeah, like I say, it's kind of a joke among the family because a certain person, but it was a good one. Yeah, Harvenger. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to remember that.
Okay, Dee.
Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in, and also thank all of those who joined us in the Palbach Auditorium. Stay tuned for Voice of the People, hosted by November Hansen. Her guest tonight will be David Zimmerman. And be sure not to miss Thursday night, March 4th at 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, for a pre-recording with the Phoenix Lights witness, Mike Fortson. The show will be replayed on Saturday, March 13th, for the 13th anniversary of this 1997 very significant event. And please join us again next Saturday for another episode of Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis, where my guest will be Stanton Friedman. Until then, keep an eye to the sky. Good night, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is my